Do you remember when the front-wheel drive Mazda-based Ford Probe almost replaced the iconic Mustang? It sounds unthinkable today, right? But it nearly happened. Today, let's talk about it. You could say the story of the Ford Probe started way back in 1920, the year Mazda was founded. But back then it was known as the Toyo Cork Kogyo Company. Their first vehicle was designed specifically to carry corks. Fast forward to the 1960s and Mazda's foray into passenger cars was not all red wine and roses. They needed some financial help and they found an answer in their partnership with Ford. With the looming oil crisis in the 70s, Ford wanted to take advantage of Mazda's fuel-efficient vehicles for the US market. By 1979, Ford ended up buying a 25% stake in Mazda and began selling rebadged Mazda trucks in the US. The oil crisis hit consumers hard and fuel-guzzling muscle cars began to look like a thing of the past. Not only were V8 engines getting suffocated by mandatory emissions equipment, they were also getting sidelined in favor of much more efficient four-cylinders. Even if you were a die-hard car enthusiast in the late 70s and early 80s, you probably didn't want to feed your inefficient muscle car the entire contents of your bank account. While the Mustang 2 was still offered with a V8, it also was available with a fuel-sipping four-cylinder. The third-gen Fox body Mustang hit showroom floors in 1979, and sales were initially strong but soon began to fall. And even the Fox body could be had with a 2.3-liter four-cylinder that churned out just 88 horsepower in an attempt to lure buyers with improved fuel economy. And Ford was starting to feel the pressure from Japanese automakers who were gaining ground in terms of quality, reliability, and fuel efficiency. Even before the Probe was a glimmer in a Ford product planner's eye, the Mustang seemed like it was on borrowed time. The gas-guzzling, front-engine, rear-wheel drive muscle car was looking like ancient history. The market had spoken, and it said fuel efficiency was the future, and Ford wanted a solution for a sports car that was better than stuffing a puny engine in a Fox body.
Capture the new breed of Mustang for $79 at your Ford dealer now.
Ford was already rebadging Mazda's Capella as the Telstar overseas, and they thought an efficient Mazda platform could be the future of a new, forward-thinking, futuristic Mustang. In 1982, Ford hired designer Toshi Saito to design a new Mustang that rode on Mazda's GD platform. The design was finalized in 1983 and was given the code name ST16. Things were on track for this sleek, futuristic front-wheel drive car to become the fourth-generation Mustang, and for the existing Fox body Mustang to be renamed Mustang Classic and then slowly phased out. In 1985, Mazda took over Ford's Flat Rock, Michigan assembly plant and was tooling up to produce the Mazda 626, the MX-6, and this soon-to-be new Mustang. But not everyone within Ford was on board with the idea of rejecting the traditional rear-wheel drive V8 pony car platform, and internal discussions were casting some doubt on the idea of a Mazda-based Mustang. The low-slung cowl of the ST16 meant there was no room for a V8, and there were no plans for one. A vocal critic within Ford was designer John Coletti, who apparently vehemently opposed the project. He's known as stating, "I'd rather the Mustang name die than for it to be put on that." Ouch. Everything came to a head with the 1987 Auto Week cover story, where details of the ST16 were leaked with the tantalizing title, "Exclusive, the '89 Mustang." Unsurprisingly, Mustang diehards blew a collective head gasket when they heard this news. Front-wheel drive, no V8 option, designed by Mazda? Every bit of this news was blasphemous to the pony car traditionalists. Ford execs even received death threats. Well, Mustangs are pretty good at running people over while leaving car shows, so I guess this tracks. Although I do need to ask, where was the outrage when Ford put a measly 88 horsepower four-cylinder in a Fox body? Where was the outrage then? Just saying. Ultimately, Ford realized that they had made a colossal mistake. It became clear that the ST16 couldn't be called Mustang, so they needed to figure out a plan B, and quick. So they decided to go with a space-age name that had been used for Ford concept cars in the past, something that is perhaps one of the worst names in automotive history: Probe. The alien probe and anal probe jokes started almost immediately, and for some reason, no one sent death threats to Ford execs over this suggestive name. Get past the name, and what Ford and Mazda built was a pretty rad automobile.
The new Ford Probe GT.
Have you driven a Ford lately?
Introduced for the 1988 model year, the base Probe was powered by a Mazda 2.2-liter four-cylinder, making 110 horsepower, not too shabby for the era. And the GT model came with a turbocharged Mazda 2.2-liter, making 145 horsepower, pretty stout for a sport compact in '88. Later models got a Ford Vulcan V6 that made 140 horses in 1990 and 145 in later years, but made less torque than the turbocharged 4. Base trims could be had with a Mazda-sourced automatic, but the GT came with a smooth-shifting Mazda 5-speed manual only. The mechanically identical Mazda MX-6 went on sale the same year, but it had a more straightforward exterior design. The Probe's design was super sleek and truly looked like it was from the future. The Probe was so futuristic that the producers of Back to the Future 2 used them as the basis for cars, supposedly from the year 2015. The sport compact market was teeming with options in the late 80s, from the Toyota Celica, the Honda Prelude, the Nissan 240SX, the Mitsubishi Eclipse. Even with this strong competition, the Probe sold very well in the first few model years, to the point where people were paying over sticker price. Reviews were solid, people loved it.
The Ford Probe is one of the finest front-wheel drive performance cars in the world.
It even made Car and Driver's 10 Best list in 1989, and Mustang enthusiasts were glad that their pony car formula wasn't abandoned. With the introduction of the Probe, Mustang sales actually ticked upwards, as many buyers thought the end was still near for their traditional platform. But with no clear replacement in sight, Ford knew they needed to develop a replacement Mustang. The Fox body Mustang soldiered on with only minor updates until 1993, 14 long years after it was released. And Ford finally introduced the SN95 Mustang for '94, which was based on a revised version of the Fox body platform with new engines and sheet metal. To me personally, the SN95 is my least favorite Mustang. I just don't really like how it looks. But I guess those angry Mustang fanatics in 1987 finally got what they wanted, a newish Mustang 7 years later. Sales of the first-generation Probe slowed down by the early '90s, and the introduction of the second-generation Probe was on the horizon. This time around, Ford execs weren't saddled with the problem of a name. The Probe was considered a success. The second gen was still to be mostly a Mazda design shared with the MX-6, however, Ford was now responsible for the Probe's sheet metal and interior. Enter Mimi Vandermolen, the woman responsible for the design of the new Probe, and the first female design executive for any automaker. Women have long been underrepresented in the automotive world, but Mimi first made a huge impact with her innovative design work on the groundbreaking Taurus, developing new standards for interior ergonomics that would eventually be copied by nearly every other automaker. And with the Probe redesign project, she made it her mission to improve the driving experience for women. The front end was lowered to make the car easier for smaller drivers to see out of. She streamlined the knobs, door handles, seats, and buttons, and even asked male designers to wear fake nails and threatened them to wear skirts while getting in and out of the car. That is hilarious and totally badass. All in an effort to get them to understand how these designs could be improved by focusing on the female perspective. She famously stated, "If I can solve all the problems inherent in operating a vehicle for a woman, that'll make it that much easier for a man to use." And turns out her focus on these design details was noticed and appreciated. Out of the gate, sales were strong and reviews were positive. The Probe GT was Motor Trend's Car of the Year in 1993, and it earned a spot on Car and Driver's 10 Best list in '93 and '94. The new Probe GT could hit 60 miles per hour in 7.1 seconds, quite quick for the era. And handling was excellent by front-wheel drive standards. And that's unsurprising considering how good Mazda is at designing fun-to-drive cars. Given that it was the '90s, color choices were quite solid during this era, with a beautiful teal and this boysenberry metallic that I have here on my '97 GT. Though I suppose my paint has seen better days. Two drivetrains were available. The base model got a 2-liter Mazda 4 making 115 horsepower, but the smoking hot GT received Mazda's KLDE 2.5-liter V6 making a respectable 164 horses. And yes, this small yet powerful V6 was crammed into that tiny engine bay. Don't ever try to change a water pump in one of these, or a crankshaft pulley. It's not fun. Probes flew off dealer lots during the first couple years of this generation, but sales started to wane as the competitive landscape got more crowded and consumer tastes changed. First-gen sales peaked at nearly 134,000 in 1989, and the second-gen's best year was 90,000 units in 93. By 97, the writing was on the wall, with just 17,000 units moving off of dealer lots. This second-gen Probe was also available in Europe, but sales were quite weak there through its entire run. A third-gen Probe was in the cards, but for some misguided reason, it ended up getting reimagined as the new Mercury Cougar, in an attempt to bring a younger crowd to the aging Mercury brand. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. Ford and Mazda continued their relationship throughout the early 2000s with several shared platforms and rebadges, but ultimately parted ways completely in 2015 when Ford sold its last remaining stake in Mazda. The story of the Probe started off as the near death of the front-engine, rear-wheel drive pony car platform, but ultimately it ended up showcasing the ability of Ford to react to market trends and consumer influence, and highlights the successful partnership between Ford and Mazda in the 80s and 90s. While the Probe is often forgotten today, it should be remembered as a very important car that hit the market at just the right time, but almost with the wrong name. If you like this video and you want to see more like it, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon. If you want to help support the show, please consider buying a Hello Road t-shirt, like this broken Ford Probe t-shirt that I'm wearing right now. Thanks so much, I hope you're well, and I'll see you soon.